Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jack the Lad podcast. On today's episode, we've got on Jayne Cook. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Obviously, I came across you on Instagram in your beekeeper outfit. Do you want to tell everyone what you do rather than me trying to butcher it?
Sure. Well, what you see is me as a beekeeper. I'm a hobbyist beekeeper, backyard beekeeper. I started doing this a couple years ago, and my whole platform on social media was my process of learning how to keep bees. So this is not my full-time job. I do something completely unrelated. But what I found is that working with bees has been very beneficial to kind of counterbalancing what I do in my real life, which is working in healthcare.
All right, lovely. So for you then, like, how did you get into beekeeping?
So my husband actually started keeping bees probably 5 or 6 years ago. I came home from work one night, and he was watching a bunch of YouTube videos about bees, and I was so confused. I was like, "What is this?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm just thinking about maybe doing this." And my exact words to him were, "How involved in this hobby do I need to be?" So I really was not interested at all. And then, so he ended up getting bees. He had a couple seasons. Keeping bees is actually not as easy as everybody thinks. He had 2 years where the bees just did not survive, and so he ended up having a couple really good years. And then, truth be told, COVID hit, and I was home a lot more. And it happened to be his first year that he had overwintered a hive. So I was kind of watching this process more. I was watching him be successful at it. I was kind of absorbing the experience just from the sidelines. And then, like many people, I got on TikTok, and I ended up kind of going down the bee talk rabbit hole and was like, man, this is really cool. Like, I have access to this, there's really cool things that are happening. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And I remember I was at work and I had this 9-day stretch off. And I told somebody at work, I was like, I think I'm going to get some bees. And they were like, right. And I came back after that stretch and I had 2 hives. It was just very quickly. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think in retrospect, I was maybe a little impulsive, but it's all worked out.
So when you say obviously 2 hives, why 2 hives and not 1 hive?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about bees is that they all have different personalities, like each colony. So when you're talking about a hive, you're talking about one colony, and every colony has a different personality. And so a lot of people will tell you, if you're going to start keeping bees, it's good to have 2 because you learn different things from each of the colonies. Plus, you can use resources for each of them. So, like if one of the hives isn't as strong or needs resources like honey, or they lose their queen, you can pull brood or just frames of different things into the either hive and kind of exchange things. So
So what type of bees do you have?
I have they are Italian honeybees. They are one of the easiest ones to work with. In my area, we really only have access to, well, that's not true. I say we typically can get Carniolans and Italian, which are the easiest ones to work with. They tend to have very mild temperaments. They're good storers and foragers, and they're hardy. They can make it through the winters. But there's lots of different, I don't know if they're species or, gosh, I don't know, like different kinds of honeybees that people use in their apiaries. But those are the 2 that we have most access to.
So what's the sort of distinctive characteristic of an Italian bee?
They tend to be fairly calm. They have good temperaments.
But
Um,
do they look the same as?
oh yeah, you wouldn't know if you were to put like 4 different kinds of honeybees. I wouldn't know.
Oh right, okay. How
Hmm.
how do people know then? How do they?
They can do genetic testing.
Right, okay.
Um, but also, there's Africanized honeybees, which tend to be more aggressive, and so they typically they live further south because they don't winter well. But they are real aggressive. Like if their genetics intersperse with the Italian or the Carniolans or the Russian, then your bees tend to be a little spicy.
Right, okay.
They're temperamental, but I've been told that they don't really come this far north, but I think it's starting to change. I
Whereabouts are you?
I am in Kansas City, the Kansas City area on the Kansas side. So pretty much smack dab in the middle of the United States.
Right, okay. That's Dorothy country, isn't it?
It is Dorothy country. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just making sure. I've not seen Wizard of Oz in a few years, so
Oh, great movie.
yeah, for its time, I suppose. So tell me a little bit about the bees then. Like, what's your sort of day-to-day interaction with them? Sort of that sort of stuff.
So the funny thing about beekeeping is that the first year you're super involved. My first year, I wasn't working with the bees. I was reading about the bees. I was listening to podcasts. I was um, very much just absorbing as much information as I could. And I was checking them probably once every 7 to 10 days. After that first year, though, you don't really want to get into the hives too much because every time you get into one of your beehives, it actually disrupts them. They're not happy about it, and they stop being productive. Um, and you can have things go wrong, like the bees can blame the queen for there being chaos in the hive, or you can destroy brood, which is baby bees. And so my bee teacher told me, he's like, yeah, every year you keep bees, you kind of cut the amount of time that you're actually working with the bees in half, unless you have more hives. So on a day to day, I it's very little at this point. Especially right now, it's super hot where I am. It's like 101 degrees today, um, and we're just kind of letting them be. um, we will walk by. My husband and I will walk by because our hives are in our backyard, but we'll do kind of drive-bys and just make sure that we're seeing activity. Um, but they've got a good water source nearby, and that's really all they need from us right now.
So, how long would it take a hive to make honey, like to make enough honey,
Hmm.
for you to harvest?
Yeah. So basically, when I got my hives, I installed a package, which was 3 pounds or approximately 10 to 12,000 bees. Put them in the box, and I put them basically in a box that had no resources. So they were just empty frames. And um, that whole first season, all they're doing is building their home. So they're doing construction, they're building their comb, they're building up their colony by making baby bees, they're foraging, bringing in honey to support the colony. That first year, though, you really should not expect to get honey. If you do, it is kind of a bonus. And I was lucky. My first year, I actually got honey from both of my colonies. It was beginner's luck, I'm convinced. But so you can get it the first year, but you can't take it from their boxes. So if you ever look at a typical Langstroth's hive, you see these stacks of beehives or of boxes, and the two bottom ones, which for me are deep, excuse me, they're called deep hive bodies. That's all for the bees. So I don't take any of that. If they happen to put more surplus honey above that, then I will collect that. But other than that, you leave the rest for the bees.
So how much are you getting from that excess then?
That first year, not much, like 15 to 20 pounds. It was not a lot, but a lot of it is really weather dependent because if you don't have moisture, or right now it's really dry and hot, we're in a bit of a dearth. So flowers are not producing a lot of nectar. If there's no nectar, the bees don't have any nectar to bring into their hive to make into honey. So if you have a really dry winter like we did last year, we had 5 hives and we got maybe 60 or 70 pounds of honey, which isn't a lot. This year we had a really good spring, and right now we're estimating, we've got 10 supers on, 10 supers, or maybe 30. I'd say we probably have potentially 150 to 200 pounds of honey on our hives right now.
So how does that work then? If you're getting 150 to 200 pounds of honey, do you share the love?
Oh yeah, we will harvest. We typically harvest at the end of the summer, but because we are having a really good year, I think we're actually going to harvest next month. Just because we're running out of supers, we're running out of honey supplies, or collecting supplies, and so we will harvest, and then we just sell to our friends and family.
All right. So when you said earlier about obviously the bees make from the nectar to the honey,
Mm-hmm.
like what happens there? Like how do they do that?
Oh yeah, so bees will collect the nectar into it's called a honey stomach. So the big thing is like people will say like honey bee barf, and it is regurgitated, but it's not really digested. It's not really the same way you would think, as like vomit. So basically, what they do is they collect the nectar into their honey stomach where there are enzymes. When they bring it back to the hive, they transfer it from their honey stomach to another bee that works in the hive. And the honey then, or the nectar then gets mixed with the enzymes in that bee. And it just kind of continues. This process will happen, I think, anywhere from like 6 to 20 times within the colony, continuing to get more and more broken down. And then they deposit it into honeycomb. And then they fan their wings to dehydrate the honey to usually like 15 to 17%. Once it's dehydrated, they cap it off.
Blimey heck.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's a lot of time when I will sit there in my hives with my camera and try to capture like the transfer, but there's so much going on. I just don't know that I've ever actually seen it, but it's pretty cool.
So when you're videoing them, then obviously you're in your suit. What's it called? Just a beekeeper suit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how close are you getting with your phone? Like when you're doing that?
I'm right up in their space. Within, I'd say sometimes I'm like a centimeter away. I also have a macro lens or a lens so I can kind of get in real close there to focus on the details. But yeah, I'm very close. They really don't mind that much. There's always a few like flying around. It's interesting because all the bees have different jobs in their hive. In the colony, a worker bee will have many jobs throughout her lifetime, and they change based on how old they are. So I'll crack open the hive, and there are guard bees that will come around and be like, "What's going on here?" But if I'm in the hive and I pull a frame and I'm looking at a frame of baby bees, that frame is typically covered by nurse bees. So they're bees that are specifically there to feed the babies, take care of the babies, make sure those babies like get what they need to continue the colony. And those bees don't care what I'm doing. Like they are not focused on me at all. So I can really get some nice shots of what they're doing. I can take a look inside the comb and see the eggs and the larvae, and they're fairly undisturbed.
Well, that's amazing. I didn't realize that. I mean, I've been speaking to people since we obviously organised the last one about like, I've got a beekeeper coming on, and everyone said the same thing. Like, why do you want to get a beekeeper on? And I was just like, because it's fascinating to me. Like without bees, from what I understand, without bees, obviously this globe doesn't spin correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, as soon as I saw your Instagram, I was just like, I need to get her on.
Thanks.
And it's something I know nothing about, but it does intrigue me massively. So obviously you've mentioned there about the nurse bees and the guard bees as well. Could you just go from should we go bottom up or top down? Let's go bottom up. So what, like for the the different sorts of bees, like, and the roles that they play.
Mhm.
Who's like the, the bottom runner?
So they're all important.
Of course.
Every job is important. It really, so it's interesting. So the average lifespan of a honeybee right now, like during the summer months, 6 weeks. So it's not long. But a bee will emerge from her, I don't know, her cocoon or whatever, the pupa, her brood, her cap brood. And her first duty, she goes, she gets something to eat, and then she comes back and she actually cleans out I'm having a, can't think of the word. She cleans out the comb that she came out of. So
Right.
the cell. She comes out, she cleans that out and gets it ready for the queen to lay another egg in there as quickly as possible. So as soon as she comes out, she's essentially like cleaning house. Um, and then at the beginning, they will stay, the first 3 weeks, they will do jobs within the colony. So they might first be nurse bees that will take care of the baby brood or the baby bees. And then at a certain point, I think like 7 to 10 days, their wax glands mature. So then they will start to create wax that will be used within the colony to create new honeycomb. So at that point, they become constructors, they become architects, they are builders. And then, at that point, they might switch to um, be part of the team that makes the honey, that transfers the honey or like packs the pollen into the comb. There's also attendant bees, which are the bees that all they do is make sure the queen gets what she needs. They feed her, they clean her, they point her in the right direction of where she needs to go. And then there's other duties inside, things like undertaker bees. So, like, bees die in the hive and bees are very hygienic. So they're going to take all the dead bees and like throw them out the front door.
Right.
um, so and then the last duty that they do before they actually go out to become foraging bees is they guard. So they stand guard at the entrance of the hive, making sure that predators don't come in or bees from other colonies. And then the last stage of their life is foraging. So they are going out, they are collecting honey, they are collecting pollen. You can always tell which bees those are because they look a little bit more ragged. They've been out in the environment, whereas the bees that are inside the hive are fairly protected.
So every bee goes through that process then?
Yeah, they might not all do all the jobs, but they have like variations of, yeah.
So when you say about obviously the foraging bees, and you mentioned obviously their 6 week lifespan, which again I didn't know. How long do they forage for? Like within that that 6 week span, how long are they utilised for foraging?
So 3 weeks typically. They from what I've read, it sounds like they spend half their time in the hive, half the time outside of the hive. Now, once they are, out in the world, there's lots of things that can happen, right? I mean, I have I have a bird that I've watched like come down and literally like swoop bees up outside of the hive. So there's all sorts of predators. There's people, there's fertilizers and insecticides that can get them. There's um, it's just, the hope is that it will be 3 weeks, but
So the 6 weeks.
it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't
I
realise that.
know. I
So
know.
so you said when you first started, so your first hive you put 10 to 15,000 in?
10 to 12, yeah.
10 to 12. So 10 to 12,000 bees in. And
Mhm.
then so every 6 weeks, obviously it's recycling, you're getting your new bees. But does the hive grow?
Mhm.
So how
Yes.
many are in each hive now?
So the queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day, every day. So once they have
Blimey.
that comb established, the queen is just like an egg laying machine. I mean,
Yeah.
she is busy lady, and all the colony. That is their whole point, is to like get that colony to grow so that they can survive. Not only so they have enough enough bees to go out and forage, but also so they can survive the winter, because it's all about survival. And so um, they will um, they will expand their pollen or their population very quickly. I want to say right now my colonies probably have, I don't know, 100,000 to 120,000 bees in them,
Right.
if I
Okay.
had to guess. And it happens fast, because so it takes, from the time that the queen lays an egg, the majority of the colony are worker bees, right? There's three kind of bees. There's the queen, there's one in the hive. Then there's drones, which are males, and that only makes up 5 to 10% of the colony, but the rest are all female worker bees. And so a female worker bee, from the time that that egg is laid to the time she hatches, is 21 days. So for the first few weeks, you're not going to see a lot. But once that first round or that first generation hatches, then it's just kind of an exponential growth, because you're constantly hatching new bees.
Right. You mentioned there about drone bees, that they make up 5% of the population. At
5 to 10.
5 to 10, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the males.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so what? Why is it such a low percentage of males?
Well, because they don't really contribute to the colony. Their sole purpose is to mate. And once they've done that, they die. So it's really interesting, because so if you think of just the science part of it, bees, in survival of the fittest, right? And it's all about spreading your genetic material. So a male bee, their sole purpose is to spread that queen's genetic material. So they do not mate with the queen in that colony, and
Right.
they go off, and they go to this place called the drone congregation area, which is basically like a waiting place. I think of it like a bar when I was in my 20s, where, they just go and hang out and they wait for queens to fly by, and then they go and mate with her. And they mate mid-flight. And their phallus actually like pops off, and they like die. They fall to their death, because once they've mated, they've completed their job.
Hmm.
Um,
So
to
it's a
the point,
kamikaze mission.
I'm sorry.
So it's a kamikaze mission.
Yes, yes. And the drones that don't mate, they come back to the hive at night, and then they go out and try the next day, until the fall comes. And when the temperatures start dropping, and the bees know, okay, it's time to start getting ready for winter, we're going to have limited resources, they actually kick all the drones out. So there are no drones that survive winter, because they do not contribute. They don't get to stay.
Right. Okay. I've just been over on a year's turnover then for bees. If you've got 100 to 120,000 bees and they only last for six weeks at a time,
Mm-hmm.
my quick maths. What's that?
I
4,
know.
8, 9. So you've got nine cycles basically of your 100. So you're over 1 million bees
Yeah, yeah.
being
Well,
born a year.
in the winter too, they have longer lifespans, because they're not going out and foraging.
Right.
So the job of winter bees and the job of summer bees is different. The job of summer bees is to go out and forage, collect honey, so that the winter bees can survive, because it's very much a all for one
Yeah.
philosophy, right? So their primary interest is the interest of the colony. So in the winter, you get a different kind of bee. In fact, they're called fat bees, because they're a little beefier, and they have more fat storage on their bodies, because they are not going out foraging. Their whole job is to cluster around the queen and to quiver and shake their bodies to create warmth, to keep the hive warm, so that they survive. That's it. They don't go forage. They don't go. They're not building. They're really not a lot of baby bees that time of year. It's truly just surviving the winter months. So those bees can last 4 to 6 months, depending on how long the winter cycle is here.
Ah, right. Okay. So obviously you mentioned there about the buzzing to keep warm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I saw something on, some nature program, documentary, whatever, about if they get attacked, do they heat up the, I'm sure it was hornets or something like that.
Oh, yeah. So one of the ways that they defend themselves or try to defend their colony is they will create a ball, like a murder ball is what it's called. And they use their
Nice.
heat, they vibrate their bodies to like basically cook whatever is in the middle.
And it's, if I remember rightly, and this was a while ago that I watched this. Isn't it so they get to such a temperature that it obviously the internal of the ball is a lot hotter than what they are, and they
Mm-hmm.
go right up to like their limit pretty much, don't they? They're like almost cooking themselves.
Yeah, it's warm enough where sometimes they'll even do that to their own queens, but I don't know what the exact temperature is. I've never really thought about it. It's a good question.
That's all right.
But yeah, I mean, it's enough to kill the insect.
To kill it off, yeah. So you mentioned there as well, obviously, about the predators and stuff like that it's got, and insecticides and all that sort of stuff. How much of an effect do insecticides have, or monocrop agriculture, stuff like that? How much does that affect the bees?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you have a large area that's being, people treat their lawns even, and sometimes that you have the wind blowing in the right direction, that could come over into our bee yard. It's a big problem. It's no secret that pollinators of all sorts, not just honeybees. In fact, honeybees are not the bees that need to be saved. It's really the natural local bees and all sorts of other pollinators that are being affected mostly by this. But it's a huge problem because we're kind of wiping out entire areas because we're trying to kill the insects on the crop and not really thinking about the pollinators that are responsible for being able to pollinate all these crops.
Yeah, it seems to be obviously because we need it for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
It just decimates. Like say for corn, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the corn that they make now, they've made it so that it is like it doesn't react to like the pesticides that they put on it. So basically, they spray it over everything, but they've made the corn's been manipulated in such a way now because of science and stuff that the Roundup or whatever that stuff is doesn't affect it, but obviously it just completely nukes like everything else. And it's, I mean, we're getting slightly off thingy there, but I had a vegan on the podcast before, and we got into the sort of weeds of that. I mean, I've learned a lot more now since, but yeah, about like how much stuff is killed. Like I didn't realise, I suppose naively, obviously with the combine and stuff, all the sort of shrews and mouse and and the mice and all that, and it was crazy because they so what are you looking to do in the future with your bees?
I don't really have plans. I've talked about writing a children's book. Again, my whole platform was basically creating accessible information. For me, the funny thing is I don't really like honey that much, but I really like bees. I find them fascinating. And so as I was learning about it, I couldn't stop talking about the things that I was learning. I just was so fascinated. But I also think it's important to like give information in ways that people understand it to make it really easy. And so when I started making my videos, a lot of my friends who are teachers were like, I showed these videos to my kids in my classrooms. And so I thought it might be kind of fun to do a children's book. But I don't really have plans. Honestly, it's fun and I'll keep doing it until it is fun or until it's not fun, which I mean, I don't think that's going to be a problem, but I
No.
don't have plans. This is this is one of my hobbies that I can do at my house. And, I don't think it'll turn into a full-time job. So
So children's book, What what's the plan?
I have several ideas. Excuse me. I have a couple ideas. My handle is Fun Size Beekeeper, as you know. And so I thought it'd be fun to do something like adventures in fun size beekeeping but I don't know. I have a couple of friends who are illustrators or they've written books. So I, I'm so involved with so many other things right now that it's kind of been put on the back burner. I'm just trying to keep my bees alive.
So when you first started out, or now looking back on when you first started out, what's something that you wish you knew before taking this on?
Um, well, like I had kind of mentioned, when I decided to get bees, I felt like it was a little impulsive. Um, if I had to do it over again, I would have spent the winter getting more information, just learning more about bee behavior, things to expect. Um, I definitely was in a cramming situation because I got my bees and then I was learning. I had some basic knowledge, but I didn't take my first beekeeping class until 4 months after I had installed my package. I mean, so I was doing a lot of self learning. But I think that's probably it. I think, yeah. And the other thing is just knowing that, like, you're going to meet a lot of beekeepers, and a lot of beekeepers do things their own way, and there's not a right way or a wrong way. The people have their own ways of doing it, and that's totally fine as long as, it works for you. And um, I just try not to be too judgy about that stuff. And I don't respond well to people who judge me about that stuff. I try to be very diplomatic, like, thanks for the information. Like, I appreciate it. Like, I'm still learning.
So what's surprised you most about having the bees?
um, so I work in emergency medicine, and a lot of when I'm at work is very go, 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 go. It's, high intensity, high volume. And so I think I knew that when I was working with bees, it was going to be very different. But I think the unexpected benefit that I had is that it really has taught me how to practice patience and to really just, I kind of said something, it just complements that part of my life so well, because it really just kind of gives me purpose and, like, to be present and to just really be slow and methodical. And it's just been such a good thing for me, almost like a therapy, for lack of better words. I really look forward to my hive inspection days. I wish I could do it more, but like I said, I try not to disturb the hives now that I'm not learning. It would be for me, not for them. And so I try to put the bees first. But I think for me, that was probably the most unexpected thing. And honestly, like, my husband and I have had a lot of fun with it. I think it's kind of, we've been together for almost 20 years, and nowhere in our wildest dreams when we got together did I think we would be, keeping bees together. Just traveling the world, yes. Keeping bees, absolutely not.
No. So you mentioned there about your hive inspection days.
Uh-huh.
How often do they happen?
At this point, probably once every 3 weeks, maybe two. It's kind of weather dependent. If it's rainy or cloudy, we don't do it, and so it might get postponed. We try to get down there and actually, like, crack open just to make sure. I just recently had to install new queens into my colonies because there weren't any queens. I'm not sure why. And so in those kind of situations, then we will inspect more often. But I inspected like a week ago. And I'm going to leave them alone. Like, I have no intention of opening that hive again for at least 3 weeks, because I want that new queen to really feel safe and secure. And I want that colony to do what they need to do with me, without me disturbing them.
How do you introduce a new queen?
So there's a process, because they will recognize her as a foreigner, and so they will immediately want to attack her. She usually comes in some sort of a cage, and there's usually some attendant bees that are in there with her with a candy piece, and we just put her in. We put her right up directly on a frame, and we so I wish I had one with me, but basically there's like this little cage like this, and on both sides there's a cork, and on one side is candy. And the candy is there not only to give them nourishment, but also to create a block, so that the bees from the colony can kind of eat their way through the candy piece to get to her, but also it gives them time to acclimate to her pheromones, because bees all communicate through smell. And once they accept her pheromones, usually takes 2 or 3 days, then it's about the same amount of time as it takes for them to eat through the candy piece, and then they're all good.
All right, nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked this of every guest at the end of the episode. What advice would you give to someone getting into beekeeping, or just general life advice?
So general life advice. I am a firm believer that if you are not uncomfortable, that you are not growing, whether that be professionally or personally. And beekeeping was definitely something that made me uncomfortable initially, and so that's my life advice. As far as if you want to get into beekeeping, I think there's a handful of things that you can do to be successful. First, read, get literature. I have a book called Beekeeping for Dummies. That was my Bible. It still is. I use it as a reference book all the time. Take classes, join your local bee club. The thing about beekeeping is that the way bees are kept where I am is different than the ways that bees are kept where you live, because a lot of it has to do with the different plants in your areas, when things are happening, and the climates and the regions. And so you'll want to join a local bee club, so that you have that as a resource, but also mentors, having people around you that have done this for years that are willing to share their information. Because sometimes you look at something in a book and you're like, I don't really know what that means, but to have somebody like come and show you, that is huge. I did podcasts, but yeah, those are, I think, just exposing yourself, but those are the ones that I would recommend.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today, Jayne.
Absolutely.
It's been very eye-opening. I mean, just learning that they only live for 6 weeks, I didn't know that.
There's so much more too.
I know. I didn't realise. Yeah. I mean, we can do another episode if you want, another 40 minutes if you've got time.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I feel like we just scratched the surface. Perfect. Okay. Well, I'll close this off, and then we'll jump on again, and we'll do a second episode. Okay. Cool. This is brilliant. All right. Well, do you want to give everyone your Instagram, your handles and whatnot?
Oh, sure. So I'm on TikTok. My handle is FunSize Beekeeper. I'm on Instagram also. It's FunSize_Beekeeper.
Brilliant. Well, like I said, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, Jayne.
Absolutely.
Thank you
so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
The greatest.